What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to Baller Nation. This is the Off the Dome podcast. We are here, episode 9. We are here. I've got some new lights coming into the set, so I don't have to, so the lighting's pretty shit, and then the video quality will get better, and all that good stuff. And I'm gonna be getting guests on the set too. But in the meantime, I'm just recording podcast episodes just to get used to it. You know what I mean? Just got to get the habit going. And all that good stuff. And hopefully by the time the summer comes around and the real, or I guess not really the summer. Yeah, the summer. By the time like the playoffs start coming around, then we can start getting to much higher quality podcast episodes. But if you're watching this or if you're listening to this, I genuinely thank you a lot. You are part of the journey, because eventually this will get a lot bigger. And you know what? I'm always remember you guys. I'm always remember the OGs, and you guys can y'all will know y'all are OGs as well. Big shout out to everyone who's watching this, listening to this. This is just the beginning of a very long process in Baller Nation and in the Off the Dome podcast's history. Again, thank you, honestly. But without further ado, let's get going. Let's get going. The NBA never ceases to surprise us. The NBA continues every single night to surprise us over and over again, and I love it, and I love it for that. You know what I mean? That's the thing. That's the thing with basketball that I'm finding this year more than ever. The NBA is more unpredictable than it has ever been, I think, and as long as I've been watching basketball, which I really started becoming a fan of basketball. I really started following basketball back in 2011. I was in grade 4 at the time. It wasn't really like my main thing that I was following. I was more of a hockey fan. I loved the NHL. And that's me growing up in Canada, right? It's more of a, hockey's more the thing up here in Canada. But 2011, I still remember my grade 4 teacher. He would always play like the playoff highlights in the morning, right, on the big smart board. If y'all know what a fucking smart board is, man, shout out to you guys. But that was like the very first year we had smart boards, and I was in grade 4. But yeah, he would always play the highlights of the last games of the playoffs. And I remember that was the year that the Mavericks won it all, and the Memphis Grizzlies looked really good that year. And that was the year the Bulls were, I think the Bulls were really good that year too. And the Miami Heat, of course, won the NBA Finals that year. But I still remember that was 2012, the year that was very near and dear to me, or 2011, sorry. And really, since 2011, I think the NBA that we're seeing today is as unpredictable as I've ever seen it. Anybody can be anybody on any given night. Okay, basketball has always been one of the more predictable sports in the world. There's a lot less upsets in the NBA than compared to the NHL, the NFL, in soccer, football, whatever you want to call it, and baseball too. Basketball and that's because basketball, it's a team sport, but it's the most individual team sport, I think, in the world. Okay, like if one player can make or break a team more than anything else, you know what I mean? Like, because there's only 5 players in the court, and it's a much more one-on-one type of game. Whereas a team, and I mean upsets is in that if you're a 1 seed in the NBA, you have you have a really good chance at winning an NBA championship. No 8 seed in the NBA is going to win an NBA championship. That just doesn't happen. It's happened in hockey. You know what I mean? Like it's happened in the NHL. An 8 seed, the LA Kings a few years ago. I still remember watching that. The LA Kings were an 8 seed in the NHL, and and these are 7-game series as well. They 3 straight series. The 8 seed goes up 3-0, and in the series, and an 8 seed wins the NHL championship, the Stanley Cup, against a 6 seed coming out of the other conference. And I say the NBA because in March Madness it's 1 game. All right, March Madness is 1 game. Still, normally it's a top, it's a 1 or 2 seed winning the whole thing, or at least a top 4 seed winning the whole thing. But it's very unpredictable. The NFL as well is extremely unpredictable. Sure, I mean the top seed normally makes it to the Super Bowl and wins the whole thing, but anything can happen. Knockouts happen. Same as in soccer, especially you look at the World Cup. The World Cup especially, anything can happen. I think going back to like 1998. The winners of the previous World Cup don't even make it out of the group stage. If you know how the World Cup works in soccer, don't even make it out of the group stage to the next year. It's crazy. Anything can happen. But in basketball, it seems like Okay, if you're the 1 seed, if you have a really good regular season, the playoffs, you're most likely going to go far. Okay, and that always holds true. There's always teams like the Toronto Raptors back before they got Kawhi Leonard, back in the DeRozan, Kyle Lowry era, um, who do really good in the regular season, but then kind of crumble in the playoffs. But when I say crumble in the playoffs, they still make the second round. They still make the third round. The Houston Rockets, their prime example of this. They did really good in the regular season. Then the playoffs come around and they struggle. The Atlanta Hawks, back when the Hawks were winning 60 games, they're a 60-win team, and they crumble against LeBron James and the Cavaliers. But that being said, they still make the third round of the playoffs. They still make the second round of the playoffs. It's not like they're getting bounced in the first round here or anything crazy like that. But yeah, I mean, but the thing is, basketball now it's extremely unpredictable. Anybody can beat anybody, and I think that's got a lot to do with the 3-point shooting in today's NBA. Like it's much less individual, I think. And that's just me watching it. That's kind of the eye test. It's a lot more, and like there are still players like just going off. Like Bradley Beal had 60 last night, but there are still players that just go off, right? I'm not saying that it's still not an individual game. I'm just saying when you watch the game, just like okay, if one team is clicking, especially from downtown, I mean that's GG, that's curtains. There's nothing you can do about it. With the scores being as high as they have been, it feels like anybody can beat anybody, and anybody can beat anybody on any given night. The Brooklyn Nets looked absolutely invincible in the first few nights, and then they lose to the Charlotte Hornets. And you look at some of the teams that are doing really good that I'm going to be getting into that are really surprising. And yeah, but with that being said, let's take a look at. Let me segue into some surprising records in the NBA right now, and I mean surprising team records that we've seen through about 2.5, 3 weeks of NBA basketball so far. Now, keep in mind, a team's record at this point in the year doesn't really mean that much. Okay, like some of the teams I'm going to be talking about, the Toronto Raptors, they're shitting the bed. But let's be real. I mean, they've got the second worst record in the NBA. Are they the second worst team in the NBA? Of course not. Right? Of course not. Okay, but the records do show something. They just don't really show. They just don't really mean that much. I'm not taking a lot away from the records. I see the Knicks. Knicks are a 5 seed right now in the Eastern Conference. I'm like, okay, they've gone off to a really strong start. Let's see how they can continue doing this. But at the end of the day, I'm not saying okay, the Knicks are gonna be a playoff team. Like I'm not gonna do that, and I don't think you will either. Records at this point in the season don't mean a whole heck of a lot. Same as like how a player's playing. You know what I mean? Like if a player's going off right now, that doesn't mean that they're gonna be going off, because let's be real. Most teams have played around 7 or 8 games this season. Those are the 7 or 8 least important games of the entire year. If you're going to base a team's success or their future success based solely off their least important games of the entire year, now sure, there's takeaways you can take away from that game, but just because a team has been struggling recently, or just because a team has been doing really good recently, doesn't mean that team is all of a sudden a perennial playoff team or a team that won't even make the playoffs. Case in point, the Toronto Raptors. Case in point, the New York Knicks. Okay? And I think most logical fans would agree with that. But let's get going. Let's take a look at some of the more surprising records that we've been seeing in the NBA so far. Starting off, first and foremost, in the Eastern Conference, where there have been a heck of a lot of really weird records. Really weird team records that a lot of us didn't expect. Let's start off in Philadelphia. The wonderful state of Pennsylvania, the city of brotherly love. The Philadelphia 76ers are 7-1 right now. 7-1 Philadelphia. And I think going into the year, pretty much every single logical NBA fan, or pretty much every single NBA fan other than 76er fans, would not have predicted this. Of course, if you're a fan of the Philadelphia 76ers, there's chances are, I mean, you're obviously going to be biased for the team. You're going to think that you're a lot better than you actually are. Stuff like that. That goes for, that's every single fan base. Every single fan base thinks that way. Or at least the majority of them. Okay, now there have been arguments that Philadelphia haven't really been playing against any real good opponents so far. And when you look at the teams that they have beaten, when you go all the way back to opening night, they took on the Wizards, and I'm gonna go read through this list. And when you honestly look at the record shows I think the record, Philadelphia's record makes them look a lot better than I think they actually are. And guys like Joel Embiid have been playing really well. Ben Simmons gets criticized for some weird thing. Like I don't understand when people say Ben Simmons isn't like because Ben Simmons isn't the scorer, he's hurting his team. What the fact of the matter is when you put 3-point shooters around Ben Simmons, whether Daryl Morey has for the Philadelphia 76ers, when you give Ben Simmons options to kick the ball out to, he's a lethal player because you have to double team him because he can still drop to the hoop and he's an amazing playmaker. Still very young as well. Obviously, shit, like he if you have to compare him to one NBA legend, it would be Magic Johnson, but he's nowhere near that level. But he's got that same kind of play style. Okay, and when you look at Philadelphia's record, it's 7-1. That makes them look a lot better than they actually have been. Because let's look at the teams they beat. They beat the Washington Wizards, who are in the basement of the Eastern Conference right now. I think they're third last. They beat the Knicks, who are 5-3, but it's the Knicks. They beat the Cavaliers, they lost to the Cavaliers, who started 4-1. I think they started 4-1. They're now 4-4. They beat the Toronto Raptors, who are 1-6. It is Toronto. I mean, it's a team that will probably make the playoffs, but right now they're playing like absolute ass. They beat the Orlando Magic, who, okay, Orlando doesn't look that good, or you think Orlando, you don't think they're that good. I'm going to be getting into Orlando a bit later, but they are 6-2. They've got the second best record in the NBA, second best record in the Eastern Conference. That's a good win. I think that's a good win. They blew them out too. And then they beat the Charlotte Hornets. Philadelphia beat the Hornets, a team that I think they're 3-5 right now. But Charlotte's got some good wins under the belt. I think they beat the Clippers, if I'm not mistaken. Then they beat the Brooklyn Nets. I'm probably wrong with the Clippers one, though. I'm not sure. And then they beat the Hornets again, and then they beat the Wizards again. Okay, that's not a great resume. That's not a great. I mean, Philadelphia's 7-1. The teams they've beaten Washington twice. They beat Charlotte twice. They beat the Knicks. They beat the Cavs. They beat the Raptors. Or no, they lost to the Cavs. They beat the Raptors. They beat the Magic. These aren't great teams. I mean, Orlando's 6-2, but it's the fucking Orlando Magic. The Knicks are 5-3, but it's the Knicks. You know what I mean? It's not great teams, but shit, they're 7-1. They're 7-1, 7-1, and 7-1. Okay, up next they've got the Brooklyn Nets. By the time you're watching or listening to this, that game will probably have already started. They've got the Nets, they've got the Nuggets, they've got the Hawks, the Heat twice. They've got a nice little schedule coming up here. The Celtics twice in a few weeks from now. And they're going to go to the Western Conference where they play against the Lakers. But yeah, I mean, Philadelphia's 7-1. Let's move on to the Orlando Magic, who I've already mentioned a little bit. Orlando right now sitting at 6-3 are the next team that I've got listed here as the most surprising team records in the NBA. Now, I don't even think that Orlando Magic fans thought they would have a record like they have right now. They're sitting at 6-2. Okay, I say with Philadelphia, a lot of their fans probably expected them to be that good. Philadelphia fans, they expected their team to be 7-1. They're not that surprised by it. I think a lot of Orlando Magic fans, a lot more than Philadelphia fans, are surprised by their team's record right now. And I would be too if I was a Magic fan, and I am right now. I think we all are right now. This team's sitting 6-2. Now, let's not first and foremost, their big man Vucevic is an absolute. He's a demigod. He's amazing. Plus, let's take a look now at Orlando's teams they've beaten. They beat the Miami Heat, who went to the NBA Finals last year. They beat them in their first game. They beat Washington twice, and then they beat the Thunder. They started off 4-0. They lost to Philadelphia, who will have the best record in the league right now. Then they lost to the Thunder. They beat the Cavs twice, and now they're sitting at 6-2. Again, not a great resume of teams are playing there, but I've noticed that when you look at the way that the NBA scheduled their games, they're kind of playing. It's almost like baseball, where they're playing in series. You know what I mean? Like a team will play the same team on back-to-back nights or twice in a row. That's kind of like me. I was complaining earlier today. Why are my San Antonio Spurs playing the Lakers 3 times in the first 5 games of the year? And we've also played the Clippers already. Playing the Clippers again soon. Why the fuck are we playing all the LA teams right now? But it's because it's a series. It's kind of a series just to eliminate traveling, which, you know what, fair enough. But yeah, Orlando was 6-2. Up next, I've gone with the Pacers as well at 6-2. Now Indiana, they've looked really good. I think Miles Turner is a dark horse for Defensive Player of the Year. I've never really understood why Miles Turner doesn't get any recognition for Defensive Player of the Year. I've never really understood that. Last night he had 8 blocks. 8 blocks in a basketball game. That shit does not happen. That's not something that happens. 8 blocks. That's ridiculous. But Miles Turner, year in, year out, he's one of the best defensive players in the NBA. He's a stud. He's a stud. on defense in the paint for the Pacers, and he can also provide great value offensively for the Pacers as well. Indiana, Malcolm Brogdon, I think they paid a lot for Brogdon, more than I think they should have at the time last year. But he's had some really good games. I think he dropped 36 last night, and of course their all-star Sabonis. I haven't even mentioned Victor Oladipo, who's regressed a little bit, or regressed a lot since he won Most Improved Player a few years ago. He's not an all-star caliber player, I don't think, anymore, even in the Eastern Conference. But Domantas Sabonis definitely is. Sabonis is no fluke that he made the All-Star game last year. It's no fluke. You know, last year everyone was complaining, who the fuck is this Sabonis guy making the All-Star game? When there's some other players that didn't. But Sabonis deserves it. Sabonis deserves to be an all-star, and I think we can all agree with that. Vucevic as well. Those two guys, they just don't get the kind of credit that they deserve. But yeah, I'm going with Pacers at 6-2. Next up, of course, the New York Knicks. The Knicks are sitting right now at a comfortable 5-3. They are ahead of the Brooklyn Nets in the Eastern Conference standings, which nobody saw this coming, and I get it. It's the first 3 weeks of the year. The records don't mean a lot at this point in the NBA, but it's still kind of funny, and it's still no one saw this shit coming. The Knicks have a better record than the Brooklyn Nets. It's kind of funny. It's fucking hilarious. I'm not a Knicks fan at all. I'm not a Brooklyn Nets fan at all. I really don't give a shit. But like from a neutral standpoint, it's funny as fuck. The Knicks, a team that we all have to clown, a team that's always going to be clowned, sitting at the fifth seed right now. They just beat the Utah Jazz. They're sitting at the number 5 seed right now in the Eastern Conference. I want them to make the playoffs. Be fucking sick. Hold on, let me just segue real quick. Speaking of the Knicks actually doing a little bit good, in my dream world, in my dream NBA world, the Knicks, Bulls, Lakers, Clippers, or not even Clippers. The Knicks, Bulls, Lakers, Celtics, and I'd add in the San Antonio Spurs because they're my favorite team. But if those 5 teams are all really good and are all the contenders in the NBA, that's a perfect league right there. A perfect NBA revolves around the Knicks, Bulls, Lakers, Celtics, and Spurs being the top 5 contenders. They're arguably the 5 greatest franchises of all time. You could toss in if Philadelphia's doing really good as well, if Golden State's doing really good as well. I really want a season where at least the Celtics, Lakers, and Knicks are like the top 3 teams. That's when you know that prime NBA years, Celtics, Lakers, and Knicks are all in the mix. Teams like the Bulls, teams like the Spurs, teams like Golden State, historical teams like that, Philadelphia as well, who have that history. I love it when those teams are really good. I absolutely adore it. It's like in the NHL, there's the original 6. I don't know them all, but there's Toronto and Detroit and Chicago, the Rangers. The original 6, there's a few others too. The Blackhawks, I think I already said Chicago. But it's cool in the NHL, there's that original 6 teams that they had, and it's always fun when they're really good. Same as in the NBA. I really want the NBA to go back to it. And it's the Knicks. The Knicks, man, they got to step that shit up. Because in a league where the Knicks, Celtics, Lakers, and teams like the Warriors, and teams like the Spurs and the Bulls are all really good, the NBA is going to be in a great place because those are the teams that make the league the most money. They're the most historical teams, teams like Philadelphia as well. And I just can't wait. I hope in my lifetime that I'm going to watch an NBA season where like those 5 teams are the prime and are the best 5 teams in the league. That's just going to be hype. That's going to be great for the league, great for everybody. Knicks sitting at 5-3. No one saw that shit coming. Not even the most diehard Knicks fan saw that shit coming. They lost to the let's take a look at the teams. Okay, they started off 0-2. They lost to the Pacers and lost to the 76ers. By the way, Philadelphia at 7-1. The Pacers are at 6-2. Those are the 2 best records in the NBA right now. They beat the Milwaukee Bucks. They beat the Cleveland Cavaliers. That was Cleveland's first loss of the season, by the way. Or I think it was. The Cavaliers started off 4-1, and that was their one loss during that stretch. Then they lost to the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors' only win this year came against the Knicks. Okay. Moving on, they beat the Pacers. Remember, the Pacers are 6-2. Their only 2 losses of the year came against the New York Knicks. Let that shit sink in. Then they beat the Atlanta Hawks, who started off really hot. They started off 4-1, and then they beat the Utah Jazz, who, like the Hawks, started off really hot. The New York Knicks, man, they've got 5 wins, and they're against solid teams. I think they're against pretty solid teams. They're 5-1 in the last 6 games. And their one loss came to the Raptors, who have only won 1 game all year. But they beat the Pacers twice. The only 2 games the Pacers have lost this year are against the New York Knicks. Man, I really want the Knicks to be good. I'm not even a big Knicks fan. I'm not a Knicks fan at all. But I want the Knicks to be good, man. I really want the Knicks to be good. They're going to finish like fucking 20th. They're going to finish like 12th in the East, though. Let's be real. Moving on, I've already mentioned the Knicks. The Raptors, man, I got 2 more teams here. The Toronto Raptors. What is going on in Toronto? What? Someone's got to explain to me. All I heard all offseason long and going into the year is that, from Toronto Raptors fans, all I heard all year long. We're going to be a contender. If Pascal Siakam had trained during the offseason, we could have beat the Celtics and we could have beat the Heat and we could have gone to the NBA Finals. Watch out. Here we come in 2021. Here we come. OG Anunoby, most improved player. Norman Powell, 6th man of the year. Nick Nurse, coach of the year. Malachi, whatever the fuck his last name is, going to win rookie of the year. That's all I heard. I'm a Canadian. I'm surrounded by Toronto Raptor fans day in, day out, and that shit's exhausting. I love that when y'all won the championship, by the way. I cheered for y'all all the way, and you guys are probably my second favorite team in the NBA behind my Spurs. But what's happening, Toronto? What's happening? Y'all got to talk to me one time. Why are you guys 1-6? Y'all got the 2nd worst record in not only the Eastern Conference. Y'all got the 2nd worst record in the NBA. And everyone's healthy. What are you going to say? Is Kyle Lowry healthy? Yeah. Is Siakam healthy? Yeah, I think he is. Is your boy Fred VanVleet healthy? Yeah. I mean, what else do you want? Nick Nurse is coaching. I don't think you guys have any problems with COVID. Maybe it's because y'all playing in Tampa. I guess that's an excuse. Y'all can use that. I'll let you use that as your excuse. You guys are playing in Tampa. But they've lost to the Pelicans. They lost to the Spurs. Let's go, baby. Yeah. San Antonio. And then they lost to the 76ers. They beat the Knicks. They lost to the Pelicans. They lost to the Celtics. And then they lost to the Suns. They got the Kings tomorrow night. They got the Kings on Saturday. Then they play the Warriors, the Blazers, and then the Hornets. They've got a lot of winnable games coming up. Do I think Toronto's 1-6 start is going to be a reflection of how they play the rest of the season? Not at all. But after this 1-6 start, like I said, the record doesn't always tell the whole story. You can see some trends that might continue for the rest of the year. Trends like maybe Toronto isn't a contender in the East after all, like all the Raptors fans have been saying all year long. Maybe instead of being title contenders, Toronto is now a contender to make the second round. I think they are. I think if anything, the goal should be the second round for Toronto. That's how far they got last year. I mean, 2019, that's almost as far as they got last year. Big shout out to Kawhi Leonard to get y'all out of the second round. But I'm just saying, Toronto, y'all got a lot of delusional fans out there. But you're not the only team with delusional fans, but y'all got a whole heck of a lot of them. And it's kind of funny when they're wrong. That's all I'm saying. It's kind of funny when they're wrong. All right, let's move on. Phoenix Suns. Chris Paul. CP3. This man. I swear, if I hear one more motherfucker talking shit about CP3, I'm fucking beat their ass. I got that from Chief Keef. I don't understand what people still criticize Chris Paul about. This man is a perennial all-star in the Western Conference. In the Western Conference, not the Eastern Conference. You know what I mean? He's not a guard. He's not an all-star guard in the Eastern Conference, where I mean, pretty much anybody can get in. This is the Western Conference. This man he's damn near a starting guard in the Western Conference right now, in the all-star teams. Does his stats show that? Nope. Will I think he'll get voted into a starting spot in the Western Conference all-star? game that they won't even be having, but hypothetically, no, not at all. This man, his quality and ability goes way beyond what shows up on the stat sheet. CP3, wherever this man goes, winning follows. You might not like Chris Paul. He gets under people's skin. That's another reason why I like him. He pisses people off. He's a sneaky, annoying ass fucking player. We all know it. He starts fights. He always got something to say. But at the end of the day, this man, wherever Chris Paul goes, winning follows. He made the Clippers a genuine contender in the NBA. People forget this. Don't forget. Without injuries, CP3 would have a ring by now. We all know that. That should be common knowledge. Chris Paul, without injuries, he definitely would have one, I think, in Houston in 2018. You could argue he would have two in 2015 when Blake Griffin got hurt. Shit, any of those years that the Clippers had, any of those Lob City years, they'd always ended in injury. Someone always got hurt. But CP3, his team or him always get hurt in the playoffs, and it's unfortunate. It sucks, but he turned the Clippers into a legit contender. The Rockets, the closest they'd ever gotten to winning an NBA championship since, when they did win in the 90s with Hakeem Olajuwon. He gave Houston their best chance to win an NBA championship. And had it not been for injuries, we're all in agreement that, or at least a lot of us are in agreement, that they could have beat the Golden State Warriors. They were up 3-2 in that series. And going in against the Cleveland Cavaliers, a team that got absolutely fucked by the Golden State Warriors, a team that the Rockets took 7 games. And despite missing 27 straight threes in Game 7, despite getting raped by the referees in the last 10 minutes of Game 7, despite not having Chris Paul for the last 2 games of the year, still almost beat the Warriors, a team that featured 4 Hall of Famers. Safe to say the Rockets would have beat the Cavaliers in the finals, and you're saying, well, who's gonna guard LeBron James? God damn it, give LeBron a 70-point triple-double all night long. It's not LeBron James' fault that his team was absolute ass. LeBron could score 90 a game in the finals against the Houston Rockets. Who the fuck else is gonna score? Jordan Clarkson? Fuck no. Kevin Love was trash that finals. It's not LeBron's fault. I'm not ripping on LeBron here. I'm saying his team was literally ass. It was shit. The Cavaliers without LeBron James in 2018 was the epitome of garbage. He did that for the Rockets. Wherever Chris Paul goes, winning follows. Y'all gotta remember this shit. It's a fact. It's a fact of life. Teams always overachieve when Chris Paul is on their team. Look what he did with the Clippers. Had it not been for injuries, championship maybe, especially the year Blake Griffin got hurt. Look what he did with the Rockets. If it wasn't for injuries, championship? I think so, especially in 2018. The OKC Thunder, a team that had, before the season, a 0.2 chance of making the playoffs, let alone fighting for home court advantage, let alone taking the Houston Rockets to 7 games. I think that if the MVP went to the player who's the most valuable to their team, Chris Paul would have won that. And now the Suns have the second best record in the NBA. Coincidence? I don't think so. CP3 is a winner at heart, and out of all the players in the NBA, I think Chris Paul deserves an NBA championship more than anybody who hasn't won one so far. That includes Carmelo Anthony. That includes Derrick Rose. That includes that would even include Vince Carter if he was still in the league. I don't give a fuck. You might like Vince Carter more than Chris Paul. I don't give a fuck. Chris Paul deserves a championship more than Vince Carter does. Okay? Again, that's just my opinion. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, that's kind of all I wanted to really talk about. Just keep that in mind. When you're watching this season, keep this in mind. This is an amazing season. I don't know how many more seasons we're going to get like this, where you turn on the TV every night, and it doesn't matter who's playing. You don't know who's going to win. You really don't know who's going to win. Fucking random teams are beating random teams. There are random teams sitting right now in the Eastern Conference standing. Like, what the fuck are the Orlando Magic doing with the second best record in the NBA? Someone's got to explain that shit to me. Why are the Houston Rockets 2-4? Why are the Denver Nuggets tied for 12th in the West?